Welcome to the section Parsing with BeautifulSoup. Now that we've seen some basic Python web scraping using Selenium, it's time to look at some more streamlined solutions. Now, instead of depending on external resources like web drivers and parsing within the browser, which can be quite slow, we're going to now move the entire process to Python. First, we're going to look at some ways to make requests with Python to get the HTML we want to parse. Then we're going to delve into using BeautifulSoup to parse this HTML. Then we're going to do another example, scraping another website, and I'm going to walk you through my steps as we do that. Now on to the video, requesting HTML. So BeautifulSoup is only an HTML parser. It doesn't fetch the HTML from the website. So first we're going to have to look at a few methods to do this. We're going to take a look at using the requests and the URL lib Python modules, and these are real short and sweet functions. There's nothing tricky here. Then we're going to take a quick look at the HTTP protocol. So if you get some error codes, you'll at least be able to understand what's happening. Then, instead of getting the HTML from a website during the execution of your script, you can download an entire website's HTML in advance, and then load the HTML from local files. This might be better for debugging, so we'll look at wget, which is a very common tool for this. Finally, we're going to talk about the difference between client-side and server-side websites. It's important that we talk about this because otherwise you might get errors and you're not going to understand what the problem is. So here I've made a small HTML file that just says a tiny website. So all the HTML is HTML, a tiny website, and then close HTML. So now I'm going to create a small website that just runs on the desktop. And you're not going to have to worry about this, but the point is that now there's a website that this website is running on at this IP address. So now let's look at some Python code to scrape the HTML from this website. This code is very simple, but I'm going to write it in here and you'll be able to see the website responding, and then you'll be able to see the content of the HTML in the Python. So for our first method, let's use the requests module, which is very straightforward. And then I'm going to pass the URL, which is this, and then let's get the response to our query, which is just going to be the response when we go requests.get that URL. Very simple. And you can see on the left that there was a request to the server, and now we can see the HTML in the response.text. And so let's print that out. And there it is. It's our HTML. And so now that we have this HTML, we'll run it through BeautifulSoup. Let's look at a couple other ways of getting this first. So another common library that you might be interested in is URL lib. So you could go import URL lib.request, and then the request equals URL lib.request, and then uppercase request because we're going to make a class. And then the response is going to be what we get from URL lib.request.URL open. And then now we're going to pass the request we created. And you can see again, we got a request on the server. And now we can read the HTML in response.read, print it out. And it's encoded differently than it is above, but again, that's just the HTML that we have. I've moved the code for the requests module into this separate script, and I've added two things I would like to discuss. So first of all, I've added a dictionary called header with the key from with my name and email address. And then I've passed it as an optional parameter to the requests.get method. This is to be transparent and identify myself in the header of the request packet that we're sending the server. That way, if the website owner gets any unusual traffic from our web scraper, they can determine its cause and source. And I think this is really good conduct, and I encourage everybody to do it. I've also added a check for the response status code. Everyone has heard of the famous 404 response for when a website isn't found, but for a successful query, the response is 200. Other codes that are worth mentioning are 401, which is unauthorized, which means that you probably need to log in to view the site. There's also 403, which is forbidden, which may be a server denying you access if it detects excessive activity. Similarly, 503 is service unavailable. 429 is too many requests. And all of these are possible indication that your web scraper needs to be throttled. Often, beginners will make the mistake of over-requesting a website when debugging their code, because they're writing code and seeing what the output it is and then rerunning it over and over and over again. To avoid this, I think it's best to download the HTML that you're scraping onto your hard drive, and then you can write your script while loading a local copy instead of re-requesting it every time. The most common tool to do this with is wget. Wget is a free and very widely used command line application. You can download it for every operating system. I won't get into it and all of its potential flags in this video, but there's plenty of good resources online. But for instance, if I want to download a single website, I can type wget, and then I'm going to paste the URL in there, and then if I press enter, I've now downloaded the website and all of its dependencies, and I can open it here. And there you go, now we have this entire website, including all of its HTML. And now I can set that to be a file. I'm just going to prepend this with an R. And then instead of getting the HTML through a request, we're just going to open it with file. And I'm going to set the encoding to be UTF-8 as f, HTML as f.read. And let's print that out. And there we go. Now we have our HTML, and we can keep running this code without having to worry that we're going to be banned from a website. Now at this point, it's important to mention that there are two different kinds of websites. So server-side websites generate the HTML that makes up the whole website over at the server, and then they send you the HTML already generated. Client-side websites, on the other hand, will send you some of the HTML, but they're also going to send you code that then runs on your browser, which generates the rest of the website on your own computer, as in the client. When using Selenium, this wasn't a problem because we were using a browser, and this browser will run the client-side code that generates the rest of the website. But with these HTTP requests, we're grabbing the HTML directly from the server. So if there's extra code that's supposed to fill out the rest of the website, we won't see that. To determine if a website is client-side or server-side, the easiest thing to do is compare the source code of the website to the elements of the website that are then generated. And I'll show you what I mean. This website, Rotten Tomatoes, is partially client-side, so you might have the idea to navigate to this URL and then scrape some of the movies and ratings listed here. However, you're going to run into problems, and I'll show you why. So first, what you'd probably do is, you'd inspect one of these elements, and you'd go, okay, yeah, there's this class movie title. That seems like what I want. And here, this movie name is Imperial Dreams, nested right in between there. And so you might write your code, and you might think it's going to work, but if you compare this, which is the rendered HTML, to, if we go inspect page source here, this is the source HTML. And you can see there's a lot of code up here. And it's not HTML, it's look for the class movie title. There's one element. However, it looks like there should be, it says movie title here, and presumably it says movie title here. But for some reason, we're not seeing that, right? So let's say we look up the movie name. That's on the website. Surely it's in the source code. But no, it's not. And that's because this is a client-side website. So when you use your requests module, this code is what you're going to get, not the generated code. And so the methods that we're talking about in this section don't really apply in these cases. And to be honest, most websites aren't client-side like this. But this is the sort of problem you're going to run into if you're not paying attention to what kind of website you're looking at. Okay, and in the next video, now that we have our HTML, we're going to learn how to parse it using BeautifulSoup.